All right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back to another episode of NCAP Radio. I'm joined today, as always, by my partner in crime, Dave Henderson, New Zealand's Most Wanted. And we had a great episode last week, guys, with Dave and Dominic Frisby. So if you're able to join us on that, great. And if not, don't worry, get ready for another one of the same caliber. So, Dave, good to have you with us. Our guest, Chris MacIntosh, is getting set up right now. How is it in beautiful New Zealand today?
Well, it's what is it? 7:30 in the morning here, of course, Friday morning, Adam. And believe it or not, what's happened? Believe it or not, Adam, I got woken at 6:30 this morning by an alarm going off, which is outrageous over all the cell phones, of course. So my wife's was going, mine was going, and the town where I live had declared a state of emergency. And that's because of a ridiculous amount of rain that we've been having here. So my property, of course, which is a big rural property, is all fine, mainly because I do all my own work here without any government involvement. So we do it very, very well. And not to the state or the local council standards. So we don't have any problems whatsoever. But there's a number of roads that have closed, lake that's flooding, and the township is having some serious issues. So that's a bit of fun for the morning. The only thing I'm concerned about is that trees fall down and then our power gets cut off, because that's the only thing that I rely on to be delivered to me at the moment, which is shameful, really, because by now I should have become entirely and totally self-sufficient, but I'm not there. Anyway, that answers your question, Adam. That's the story in New Zealand this morning. Though, of course, I wake up embarrassed, as I do many, many mornings, because I was reading early this morning the pronouncements at the UN by our former Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, who's just appalling. And when we get Chris on, we will, given that Chris is a New Zealander as well and lives in New Zealand some of his time, we both need to apologize or atone, or certainly explain to the rest of the world for the madness of her. She's just an outrageous narcissist socialist. But anyway, have we found Chris?
Yep. So he's set up and ready to go. We're going to drop his link in the chat here in a moment, guys. So if you're not subscribed to Capitalist Exploits, or capitalistexploits.at is the website, that's going to be below. If you're just tuning in, make sure you hit the like button, the retweet button, get this space out there. Go ahead and follow everyone up here on stage as we get ready for today's episode, where we're going to be talking about the best philosophy known to man, ? I think we would all agree it is, but we'll see. And we're going to learn a little bit about New Zealand today, which, before you hopped on here, Dave, Chris and I were talking about the North Island versus the South Island. I know you're in the South, he's in the North, so it'll be interesting to hear, both of you guys' takes on the different dynamics, what it's like living your best ANCAP life in New Zealand, how you guys ended up there, and then taking it again further to the philosophy and what else is going on in the world right now. So I understand you guys had a phenomenal 90-minute conversation about a week ago that we wish we could have had live. It was offline. So Dave, do you want to pick it up from there and then hand it over to Chris?
You bet. Good morning, Chris, and it's great to have you back on here again. We had you on NCAP Radio a few weeks ago, which was excellent. So thank you for that, and great to have you back. And Chris and I have never met, notwithstanding that we're probably two of the only 5 anarcho-capitalists that live in New Zealand. But we have talked on the phone a couple of times, which is always been a lot of fun, and it's always great rubbing shoulders with people who are philosophically aligned with oneself. So, good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Dave. Yeah, that's an error we all need to correct, which I'm sure we're going to do at some point shortly.
You bet.
Yeah, welcome everyone. It's good to be here. And the topic, I guess, that we have in front of us isn't just a topic for New Zealand, certainly, and the fact that Jacinda Ardern is a narcissistic kleptocrat, but really, I think she fits into a category that is somewhat less important for us to focus our attention on. I had a conversation yesterday with a new client for our asset management firm who put it he said something to me and I thought that was a very unique way to think about it and quite accurate. And he said basically there's three types of people in the world. There are sheep, there are sheepdogs, and there are wolves. And when you and it immediately struck me, the chaos that we've had over the last 3.5 years. The sheep are basically your Pareto distribution. 80% of the population are sheep. They will simply follow slavishly whatever doctrine is put in front of them, no matter how ridiculous it might be. In other words, if you sit down, you will not need to wear a mask. But if you stand up, you will need to wear a mask. If you are sitting with or having friends with 2 or 3 people, it's perfectly fine. As soon as you have 4 people, you're immediately now should be treated as a standing threat and probably shot down. And they just slavishly take this as if it's perfectly fine. But then you have those sheep. And all sheep can live a wonderful life until they get slaughtered. And as we go through history, there are periods of time when they get slaughtered. We are at one of those points in time, in my humble estimation. But then the second group of people, which is the sheepdogs, are those who herd the sheep. And the sheepdogs, they don't have a particularly large frontal cortex, but they're bright enough. They're brighter than the sheep. They are, I would suggest, in the world that we are now living in, your professional conformists. They are the doctors, the economists, the accountants. So we are trained to think that these people are educated. What they have been through is an education whereby they have the capability to take in information and regurgitate that information, but they've never been taught to think. And so they will slavishly follow the doctrines, but they're certainly higher up the food chain of the hierarchy, and so they will be the herders. And in many instances, they're herding without even understanding why they're herding. Go and get your jabs. Sit down. Do this. Do that. They're the gatekeepers. Like I said, in many instances, not even understanding where they sit and why they're doing what they're doing. And then, of course, there's the wolves. And the wolves are the ones that will essentially be dictating to the sheepdogs what to do. And the wolves don't care about the sheep, obviously, and they certainly don't even interact with the sheep. There's no need for them to do so because you don't want to get your hands dirty. And I think in this world, the only way that one can operate is like a wolf in terms of the philosophy. And then this gets into what it is that you need to be a good wolf, if you will, if there's ever such a thing. But and I think that's the philosophy that we've been talking about with ANCAP. It's one of non-aggression.
Sure.
It's one of having certain principles. So again, you go back to Horseface, and she is a sheepdog.
You think so? You don't think that she's a sheep too?
Well, she's certainly been a herder, so she's useful to the wolves. She's herded people in that respect, right? And she's had them follow her.
Yeah.
So she's higher up than your average sheep that's wandering about aimlessly, 3 jabs full, waiting for their next mask.
Yeah. Well, she certainly put New Zealand on the map during the COVID nonsense, for all the wrong reasons, of course. But perhaps just for listeners outside New Zealand, we should just give a quick overview of the fact that we have a strange electoral system here, of course, which would take me about an hour to explain. Maybe, Chris, you can do it in a simpler way, but she ended up being in power from 2017, didn't she? She became prime minister in a bizarre set of circumstances. She initiated the COVID lockdowns in March 2020, and then we had an election in October 2020, where she was returned to power with a significant, by New Zealand standards, a significant majority, which of course is just appalling, and gave her all the validation that she needed just to keep going with all the outrageous COVID lockdowns and the things you're describing, the mandates, and so forth. But fortunately, I mean, with these things, I have a philosophic view politically that, while we are on a long, slow march to dystopia, we do have pushback from time to time. And she quit in January this year, both as a member of parliament and as leader of her party, because she was smart enough to see that the writing was on the wall and she was completely screwed, didn't she? And then she wanted to head off and become some unofficial international ambassador for not only for New Zealand but for a number of highly improper causes. But her political party today is polling in the 20s, 25, 26%. They're actually polling less than 50% of what they got elected on 3 years ago. And you have to admit that is a positive, isn't it? If we're desperately scraping around looking for some, something good from all of this. But then the worst of it is she turns up at United Nations, and I was reading, as I said, reading an account of it this morning. Did you read any of that, Chris?
No.
And her speech to the United Nations.
I caught clips of it. There were some clips of it which people had forwarded me. I've gotten to the point where listening continuously to these sociopaths is just counterproductive. I need to be spending my time doing things that are productive. Otherwise, you feel like you're just delving into this cesspit of insanity. And so, at some point, you realize that you're just dealing with a bunch of evil sociopaths. And so, getting more of their content and more of their views, etc., doesn't sort of lead me into anything better. I need to know what they're doing, and I need to know what they're thinking, such that I can prepare accordingly. Again, you need to be a wolf. You can't. So, but at some point, I just go, I already know what that entity is. I already know what its agenda is. And so now my task is to spend my time as productively as I can to actually mitigate to whatever an extent I can the shit fuckery that they're throwing at us or will begin to throw at us. And so I've tended over the last few years to sort of move more towards a matter of understanding at least what they're saying, just to keep abreast of what they're doing. But I can't stomach doing much more than that because, frankly, I just don't find it's going to be that useful for me to actually move forward productively.
Well, I use it, Chris, if I'm going to a business meeting and I'm feeling too placid or too benign. It's all. And I realize I'm going to get mauled in the business meeting. I go and read some of this on the mainstream media, and then by that time I'm very, very angry and upset, and perform a little better at the meeting.
It makes me think of
no, I know exactly.
Those chaps who go into WWF, and you see them before the fight going in the hills, rocking each other up and getting,
that's right.
I don't know if it's, do you need some V or some Red Bull? No, I'm just going to listen to these politicians and you'll come out firing.
WWF or WWE is a great metaphor there, Chris, because it's fake.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, my anger by the time I finish reading this is very real, as my wife can attest to. So, um, but she was talking at the UN about misinformation. And I have a particular interest because we've been putting a lot of effort in New Zealand and supporting people who have been getting beaten up because of their purported misinformation. I mean, and as you know, we have in New Zealand a whole misinformation or disinformation entities, state-funded entities, with dozens and dozens of people going to work. I don't know. God knows what they do. It'd be great to be a fly on the wall for a minute, wouldn't it? And just look at these people in their day-to-day jobs. And I mean, the arrogance of that proposition alone is extraordinary, isn't it? Is that I am a complete arbiter of truth and actuality here. And I don't hold any personal opinions that push me one direction or another. This is what these people are saying, and must say when they arrive at work. It must be running through their heads. They sit down and look at some pronouncement from some person who they dislike immensely and decide it's disinformation or misinformation, and they're going to do something about it. They're going to shut it down and close it down. One of these things that got me angry this morning when I read it was Ardern at the United Nations saying that. She's saying we can't ignore this misinformation. We're not hostile to the values of free speech. Well, God forbid, if nothing else defines hostility to the values of free speech, this does. And she says, after all, how do you successfully end a war if people are led to believe the reason for its existence is not only legal but noble? Well, what the hell does that mean? And then she says, how do you take...
Who determines whether it's noble? Who determines whether it's legal?
Well, yeah, and what does legal mean in that context anyway? And what does noble mean, of course, as well? And then how do you tackle climate change if people do not believe it exists? Now, I mean, that is just an extraordinarily glib and stupid proposition, because I don't doubt that everyone on the planet believes climate change, because from day to day, the weather fucking varies from the previous year.
Dave, with people who believe that women have penises. Okay,
that's true.
If you're prepared to lie about something that is so obvious, then I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to take the view that everything that you say is a lie. And that's how everybody should treat these people, with absolute ridicule. To the extent where, as most intelligent people will look at it and go, no, well, you know what, we might be somewhat sympathetic to deluded individuals, and we certainly don't like confrontation, and that's, I think, largely a problem with the world, which is the feminization of humanity. Sure. Males, true males, not that we necessarily invite it, but we understand that hostility has its place, and we will use it when necessary. And so we're prepared to stand up and say, no, we don't like this. And so, these people need to be put in their place by individuals where we say, no, enough is enough. A man or woman does not have a penis.
Well, I've been holding off, Chris, waiting for you to put Jacinda Ardern in her place, and you've let me down bitterly, of course, with that. And I don't know. God knows I might have to go and do it as a consequence. So,
well, I do want to take this as a moment to say thank you for everyone who's joining in here, especially on the replay. If you haven't already, make sure you hit the like button, the retweet button, get this out. We're here today with Chris MacIntosh of Capitalist Exploits. You can see his website down below in the thread. Make sure you check that out. Subscribe there. Follow everyone up on stage here. We're going to keep going for for at least another hour. And also, if you want to call in or you want to request to speak, don't forget, you can go ahead and do that. The bottom left corner of your screen, you can tap the little microphone button, request to speak. We'll bring you up here with Chris and Dave. But yeah, going back there, Dave, I don't know if it's you who's going to have to keep talking about how much you love politicians or if you can get Chris to do it.
Yeah, no. Well, I'm still counting on Chris, I guess, at the end of the day. But I can be a plan B if Chris isn't up for it. But I have a theory. Just going back, just adding to Chris's sheepdog, and wolves. Is that, Ardern is a hardcore socialist, and as we know, the world is awash with socialists and socialism. But there appears to me there's two types of socialists. There's what you call the sincere socialists, who are people that actually haven't sat down to figure out philosophically a meaningful political philosophy. They just feel that this or that is right, and because they feel this is that or right, they run with it and put all their energy into it, and in some cases end up running for public office or working in the disinformation project offices. But then, in addition, you can then say there's a whole bunch of cynical socialists. And these are people that actually see socialism as a path to power. They see it as an opportunity primarily to advance their own lust for power, their need for power, their desire to have power over others and control. And the latter group, of course, is the smaller group. But in and at least we can identify them and we can understand them. But it's the sincere socialists, and Ardern is, I believe, is a sincere socialist. She actually believes this crap. She believes she is doing God's work. She believes she is changing the world. They are the most dangerous, because they are also end up becoming the pawns for the cynical socialists who are wandering around looking how they're going to achieve their power. And then they have people like Ardern, who has one unique ability, in my view, and that's her ability to empathize, which, Chris, you and I have seen in New Zealand where there's been various major issues flare up, and next minute she is there. And she puts on this delightful, empathetic face, and she puts her arm around people, and she's empathizing, and people sit back and say how wonderful a leader she is as a consequence. So
yeah, what's annoying with that is you have they've taken all the aspects of both femininity as well as masculinity, and they've turned them on their head. And one of the wonderful things that can be attributed to females is their ability to empathize, and their that soft nature. That is a feminine quality, and but with her it's completely fake, right?
really,
but that is a quality. It is something that whether you're male or female, and by the way, there are no others. There are deluded people, but
okay.
other than that, there's only two. So,
Okay.
so they've weaponized these. It's weaponization of virtue, and with a person like Jacinda, again, I still think that despite how dangerous she is, I think she pretty much falls into that sheepdog category. So they're dangerous people. But arguably, I would say it's that the sheep are the most dangerous. I say that because evil is easier to identify. It's easy for us to identify Ardern and go, look at this person. This is dangerous.
Yeah.
But she only gathers her power as a consequence of the sheep. And the sheep are the stupid people. And stupid people, especially when they act virtuously and without thought, and I referenced it before. You can tell them to sit down and take off their mask and stand up when it's required, and hang out with 2 people and it's safe. And you hit 3, and now you deserve to be treated as an armed threat. And so these people are stupid. They're dangerous, often purely because they're unfortunately the vast majority, and they act in unison.
Yeah.
But when without them, the sheepdogs have no ability to do anything. So Ardern's a sheepdog. But she's been successful because of a couple of things. It's basically subversion of humanity. Think about it. We no longer elevate hard work. We elevate victims now, minorities, basically criminals. So you've got the sheepdogs that elevate the sheep at the behest of the wolves, all the while that the wolves are going to eat not only the sheep, but the sheepdogs will be put down when their job is done. Remember, they're not pets. They're simply farm animals.
Yeah. Chris, let's talk philosophically for a second. Just going back to a point you made where you suggested that the sheep live these sort of, forgive me, I'm paraphrasing, these sort of reasonable existences. And just go through life being nice, good people and just towing the line. Well, I have a theory that most people will trade off freedom for safety, won't they? Safety is such an important thing for them. But more importantly, personal responsibility and liberty, personal liberty, are 2 really inseparable concepts, aren't they? And the fundamental characteristic, I should say, of sheep is that they're willing to give up or abdicate personal responsibility. They want someone else to do all this for them. But the end result of that is this dull, numbed existence. And I mean, just going back to an ANCAP philosophy, the cornerstone, the bedrock of ANCAP philosophy is personal responsibility, isn't it? And that's something that we,
yes.
In fact, I often end up in these discussions with people where people are promoting, personal freedom, personal liberty, and championing it. But it's always good to take them and validate them for holding those as values. But I actually think you need to hold personal responsibility as a higher value than even personal liberty or personal freedom.
Well, you can't have the former can't have the latter without the former, I think.
Exactly.
And this goes back to, you look at what we're seeing today. There's this championing of, exalting of mediocrity.
Yeah.
Not just mediocrity, but those who are disadvantaged or minorities or whatever you want to call it. They come up with all sorts of garbage.
Yeah.
And these people are now heroes, right? So who was that ridiculous person who was trying to advertise Budweiser? What was his name?
Oh, Dylan.
Anyway,
I don't remember because he drinks that Bud Light. Dylan Tom. What was his name?
That's actually, we should have him as a guest on NCAP Radio.
Oh, yeah, we should. We need to pull them apart philosophically, but I bet we could give all the answers right now to any questions we might pose to him.
Well, we'll tease this one out for the audience too. We've toyed around with the idea of bringing Hunter Biden on as a guest too, so we'll see where we go moving forward.
You just offer him some crack, he'll probably come on. Yeah, no, look. But if you go back and you think, why is it that there's this exalting of mediocrity, or not even mediocrity, but the bottom of the barrel? It's so that the sheep feel good about what they're doing. They go, well, if that person's got that and they're wonderful and they're a victim and they're exalted in society. Well, it's okay for me to be mediocre. It's okay for me to lie on the sofa and watch television instead of getting up and doing something. It's okay for me to just be a wage slave. It's okay. Everything's okay. And so when you look at that, that is a lack of taking responsibility for your own mind, for your own actions. And remember, I mean, you can't
Entirely.
like what we're talking about is being. Like, who are you, and who are you going to be?
Yeah.
Because and the path to getting there, as far as I can tell, at least, begins with thinking, right? Because you can't take any actions without thought. So it's you first have thought, and then you can take actions based on the thought. And repetitive actions translate into who you are. You know, who are you, Dave? Well, it's what you do every day. That's who you are. It's who you become. And so you go all the way back to thought. They're just destroying the thought process.
Sure.
And so that self-ownership of thought is self-governing. It's the ownership of the self. It's the ownership of your creations, your intellect, your production. And that, of course, is basically private property, right? And so that's why they're trying to eliminate private property. Because if you eliminate private property, then you literally land up eliminating thought, right? What is it that you're going to do on a daily basis when you go, you know what, all of my actions, which used to produce a result, now result in nothing, in whatever the state decides it should be. So I can work my ass off and I just get my UBI. Well, why should I work my ass off when the fat slob next to me doesn't, and he gets the same amount? And so now you go, fuck it, I'm not going to do it. And then, of course, your thoughts change. And so now you don't even sit and have the thoughts of production. You don't even have your intellect just withers away and dies. And so they're trying to actually destroy the very source of production, which is the mindset. And that entire structure comes down to private property ownership and self-governing, governing yourself.
New Zealand, what is... What are the laws, I guess you could say, in regards to firearms? Are they reflective of America, or how is that being handled right now?
No, they're appalling. They're appalling, and it was a classic example where we had, I mean, it was reported internationally, that incident where he was actually an Australian guy, came in and shot up a mosque, killed 52 people. Chris might correct me. And it's just the classic knee-jerk reaction is we're now going to confiscate all semi-automatic weapons, which get taken off the streets, and we're putting up a tight gun register. Not only do you have to be licensed to have guns, but every gun you have needs to go on a register, and there's just a whole process in place to crack down. But, I mean, the thing about having a gun license itself is horrific, Adam, because a gun license, when you sign up for it, gives the police the power to enter your property at any time on any basis they choose without a warrant.
So then the whole private property argument is out of the window, basically.
No, no, very, very much. And New Zealand actually has a high number of guns per head of population, mainly because we're such a rural-based economy and environment. And so, I mean, there's an awful lot of farming people or people that work at that level who have, for a whole raft of reasons, have firearms. But, I mean, it's just a classic where, all of these people turned up. They sold their guns back to the state. The state cut them a check. It was unbelievable. But, of course, as we all know, and indeed all predicted, is all the thugs and all the criminals who had guns, and maybe they didn't have gun licenses even then, they, of course, didn't hand their guns in. So the end result was that there's shootings that go on. There's been a number of shootings recently in New Zealand that Chris will be aware of. And, of course, you're just rolling around the floor when you read about them, because they're thugs who have never handed their guns back in, don't have any gun license, their guns aren't on any register, and they're the ones out there shooting people up. So The whole thing it's just a classic knee-jerk reaction. And if you're not thinking about these things and you operate entirely on your feelings, you think, oh, well, that's good. Why do we need guns anyway? They're a terrible thing, So, and then, of course, if you're in the UK, you watch all these machete and knife murders, don't you? And, God knows why we haven't confiscated machetes and knives yet. But, I mean, I'm sure in someone's world that's a possibility, isn't it?
Don't worry. When you get on a plane, they confiscate your nail clippers, so they're keeping you safe.
That's great.
Yeah, look, I mean, it comes back to that private property side of things. So, they're saying, well, look, private property, any property, is only your property if you can defend it. So what they've done is they've said, well, they're taking away your ability to defend your private property, right? So I want to arm myself so that nobody can take these things that I've worked for away from me. So, well, that's okay. But now you need to sign a waiver such that in order to protect your private property, we need to have access to steal your private property at any point in time for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And so you then immediately go, well, why would I do that? And the answer is you basically wouldn't. But then it puts you back into the situation where you're even more vulnerable, such that you can't protect anything, not only from some forces, whether it be a robber or something, but also from the state. So now you're doubly at risk. And that comes all the way back to sheepdogs and wolves. And what you're ultimately going to get to is this Marxist, communist, socialist hellhole where the only people that operate are wolves at the government level and gangs that control those guns. And then rest assured, those guns are not registered anywhere because they're wolves. They're like, fuck it, I'm not registering my gun.
Yeah.
And
not deep.
That's why I say you start delving into a society where the only way that you can operate is as a wolf, and you need to be dangerous, and you need to be prepared to be dangerous, and you need to be able to do the kinds of things that we do not want to do. And now the question is, do you even want to get into a society that operates like that? The answer is clearly that you don't. So you have to try and develop a framework where people can live, and that's the ANCAP philosophy.
And of course, the NCAP philosophy is absolutely predicated on a moral philosophy. And all political philosophy should be informed by moral philosophy. And in fact, the political philosophy people hold, if you can get them to articulate it, actually is entirely reflective of what their moral philosophy is. And of course, for anyone subscribing to this philosophy, the fundamental issue is that, I have no claim. I have no claim on anyone else's life or property, and no one else has a claim on my life or property. And it's so ridiculously simple and straightforward. And all our relationships from that point on are completely consensual. And the right to protect one's property is absolutely implicit in all of that. So, Chris, we had Dominic Frisby on last week, a delightful guy. Do you know Dominic? Are you familiar with Dominic and his work? Yeah. Yep. And he's a character in as much as he started life, and indeed today still is, a stand-up comic who performs around the country, and does these delightful, what he calls comic songs, which are sensational. If you haven't seen them, you should look at them. But anyway,
watched some of them.
Yeah. But anyway, he was giving us an account of Sadiq Khan's introduction of ULEZ. Are you familiar with that? ULEZ, ultra low emission zone, which he's turned the whole of London into. And, I've been reading some accounts in the Daily Telegraph about it, which has been covering it quite extensively. But Dominic was giving us his immediate and first-hand account of it. And what was particularly positive about it, something you and I would enjoy immensely, and Adam would enjoy immensely, is there is a serious revolt going on this. You know, they've issued 50,000 bills or fines or whatever the hell it is that no one's paying. People have been climbing lampposts and putting spraying out the camera lens, putting bags over the cameras, chopping wires, ripping them down. And so the response to that by Sadiq Khan was he then puts all these vans on the street with cameras mounted on their roof. And so then the protesters, as of the last couple of weeks, have been getting small trucks, 3-ton trucks sort of thing, and parking them jammed up against any of these vans with a camera on the roof, so that their line of sight to take photographs is completely blocked. And then you've got the police coming out trying to move these trucks. I mean, it's just sensational as you watch the chaos flow from people who are just responding very positively to the insanity of this, and of course, any time we see that, we should be out dancing in the streets, celebrating and giving these people a pat on the back.
Well, here's I think where this gets to, and this is I think going to be a dominant theme for the decade. The wolves who are utilizing the sheepdogs, metaphorically, and Sadiq is just a sheepdog. They know and understand that each progressive move towards restrictions of freedoms is going to be met with a response. And they also know what their moves are going to be. So they were kind of in the driver's seat, right? It's like if you know you're going to prod the hornet's nest, you're aware that those hornets are going to start flying. And so I don't see that they're unaware of this. And as a consequence, the only outcome we're going to have on a go-forward basis is increased tyranny. And because when you poke the hornet's nest, you know that they're going to fly. So you either got to protect yourself or you got to start whacking them. And so they're going to start whacking at a scale and a level that most people are completely unfamiliar with, right? And so now I think that's likely to differ in certain jurisdictions, and this is an important thing to be monitoring, because where you get bifurcation across these various jurisdictions is where people will move to, right? And it's not a matter of, oh, well, taxes are a bit lower here or the weather's better. No. We're going to be delving into a completely different world where people go, you know what, I'm fleeing for my life. I had a conversation with, just anecdotally, with a client of ours, and I won't say who they are, it's confidential, but they've fled Canada. The wife, who's a local journalist for a very local paper, basically writing just, whatever's going on in the little town kind of thing, wrote about and has been writing about a number of the things that have been transpiring with this Project COVID, shall we call it. Now, she was out of the country when an arrest warrant was put out for her. So she didn't return. And now the family are in the process of literally trying to get out of the country. This is a country which most people, even to this day, don't consider to be akin to a North Korea type of country, but it evidently is. And so that's just that. I think that's just a precursor to much more of what's likely to come.
Sure. Yeah. But, I mean, isn't that the inevitability? Is that, I mean,
I'd like to say just real quick, Dave, and then definitely want to hear what you think about that. But we have a lot of Canadian listeners here on ANCAP Radio. I know I even see a few guys who are here pretty often in the audience too. So if you have anything to kind of weigh in on what Chris is saying, that'd be interesting. And again, if you're just joining us or again listening on the replay, go ahead and hit the like button, the retweet button, follow Chris and Dave. But yeah, Dave, go ahead, and I see we do have a caller.
Sure. I was just quickly going to say that. I mean, it's the nature of history, isn't it? It's the pattern of history, as as Jefferson so astutely observed, that the natural course of things is for, the state to go and people to shrink. And it just happens until a point where people do break and there is some form of a revolution, no matter what form that takes. And then there is a bit of a reset, for lack of a better term, and there is a bit more liberty and personal responsibility. And then we just back on the same path where that's heading. Anyway, Adam, let's hear from your caller.
Yeah, Jeff, we're good to see you again. Let us know, remind us where you're calling in from, and what your question or your comment is.
Yes, do you hear me? Because I'm driving. I don't know if the sound is good.
We can hear you. Yep.
Okay, let me park first. Okay, it's done. I'm calling from Canada, and I have one question. Chris, one for Dave, and before that, I will make you laughing. Because yesterday we had a kind of movement here, the parents' movement across the whole Canada, with
I saw that.
their motto saying "Leave the kids alone." The song of the Pink Floyd. You know it.
Yeah.
So the beauty of it here in Canada, we had some counter protesters, which are Antifa bands. You know the Antifa. They were yelling to some group of Muslim women. They were yelling, "Fascists, go home."
That's great.
How ironic.
That's hilarious.
Antifa group yelling, "Fascists, go home," to a minority, which is a Muslim woman. Okay. So my question for Chris is, the system is about reshaping the society and the reshaping in order to produce ships massively, okay? And they do it through the education system, okay? So what is your suggestion to look into that and to make education more how do we call it, more efficient for individuals to be self-aware of their rights and be more adult, so to say, okay? And now my second question for you, Dave. You say that for the ANCAP philosophy, there is Jeff Browick defined it. There's no rulers, but there are rules. Okay, but how could you make this to enforce this philosophy when you find some people they don't take responsibility of their self, and they don't. They call themselves that they are of this philosophy, but they don't act like that. So what are you going to do with that? Thank you.
Sure. Chris, you go. Your answer first.
Okay, so just to try and clarify, it was about education and how do we tackle what is at the root of this, which is a miseducation, if you will, or whatever. Look, I think on that front, I actually just I could point you to a podcast I recently did. I turned down most podcasts, but I did this one, and it was with a homeschooling channel, and we discussed those topics. And I think that, fundamentally, what's happened over the last.
Do you remember what the name of the podcast is, Chris? I want to pull it up as you're going here.
Yeah.
If not,
I'll find it for you. Yeah, I'll find it for you and send Adam. So we've basically subcontracted out increasing levels of responsibility, right? So Dave, you and I, we've just been talking about that core level, which is self-responsibility. If you think about it, we no longer take responsibility for our health. We just go and get some pills because we're told that's the solution. We no longer take responsibility for educating ourselves or our kids. We just send them off to some government indoctrination camps. We no longer take responsibility for almost anything in our lives. Everything gets subcontracted out, and it's because of convenience. We go, oh, that's convenient, and it's easy. They're selling us convenience while destroying what it basically means to be human. So How do you fix that? Well, you've got to take back responsibility. Education should always be about learning how to think. It shouldn't be about learning things. If you think about how we learned about, say, World War One or World War Two, we were taught to remember dates and names of generals. No, that's garbage. Who cares? Who cares? What we should have been learning about was what were the factors that led to that? What was the cause of that? And then what was the solutions that brought it to an end? Because those are repeated in history time and time again. If we understand what those are, then we're much more likely to see them coming and address them, instead of just learning that it was General Jongo Wongo Bongo who decided to go and chop off somebody's head. It doesn't matter whether it was that guy. It's what were the factors in play that led to that, which is why today we have the situation where we're watching the same things transpire and most people are completely blind to it. They're going, oh no, but it's misinformation. Oh no, but there was a virus. Oh no. No, so education at its core needs to go back to learning how to think, to be critical, and that's so self-responsibility. We can't leave this up to the state. The state's finished. Systems don't regenerate. They break down and then new ones are built. We're in the breakdown phase. It's time to rebuild. So that could be community-based type of education. I think, Doug Casey's concept with files, I think, is already gaining traction. It's happening at scale. The number of homeschooling participants has completely gone through the roof, and this is a global phenomenon now, and that's a wonderful thing. So I would suggest that we champion that rather than bemoaning the broken education system that exists, and move forward.
Yeah, well
said, you, Dave.
Yeah, Jeff, your questions I trust that Chris answered that. That it just gets down to you looking after your own kids, doesn't it? Being concerned about your kids' education. But your other question about ANCAP philosophy and how could it possibly ever, exist as a fundamental philosophy for a community or a society or a country or whatever, is of course a very meaningful and regularly asked question. But as I suggested earlier, ANCAP philosophy is turns on a moral philosophy. And so, I mean, one of the purposes of this radio station, Jeff, is to disseminate and certainly discuss that philosophy. This is not an overnight, this is not going to be an overnight issue that people are all of a sudden going to en masse wake up and embrace these ideas and these principles because, fundamentally people are often looking for someone else to pick up the tab for their problems or their issues or their bad choices. So that's why, governments are going to have a big part to play in our future, whether we like it or not. But you've got to inspire people that there is a more moral way, there is a better way. And, I mean, if we did have... let's say one of the states in Canada had seceded somehow and had completely stripped its government away and was operating on ANCAP principles. What would happen is that, communities of interest would spring up where people coalesce around a particular interest. And that interest might be, for example, equestrian. People might have a love of horses, an interest in horses. And so a whole community would spring up around that. And that would be the cornerstone of how people operate and get together. The society would look completely different from what it does today. But, Jeff, you talk about, well, how would one defend oneself? I mean, how the fuck do you defend yourself now against governments that are just out of control, aggressive, nasty, vicious, and if they don't like you, they own all the guns, they have all the power and authority, and as we see repeatedly, literally around the world, they are quite willing to take someone out whose philosophy they don't like, or some other action that person's undertaken they don't like. So we already live in a ridiculously vicious, nasty, aggressive world. ANCAP, people who adhere to ANCAP philosophy are the most peace-loving people on the planet. And the only answer here is moving minds, one mind at a time. It's a long, long, hard road, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't embark on it.
And I wonder on the topic of, people are either sheepdogs, wolves, maybe even you throw a farmer into the mix there, because you talked to Chris referenced the sheepdogs getting put down after they've done their service. Is it possible for everyone on this planet to have the capability to be a wolf, or is being a wolf something that is just in someone's DNA? I feel like from getting to know Dave, both you and Chris and your story and a lot of the people we've been able to have on this show, a lot of that inner desire and burning awareness of knowing there's something going on here that a lot of other people aren't seeing. It makes me wonder if if it's possible for billions of people to become wolves. I'd like to know what you guys think about that.
Or, depending on the definition of wolf. If you ultimately want to define the definition of wolf as someone who believes completely in personal responsibility and being willing to defend that idea as a value, to defend it in a very serious and aggressive way, then the answer is yes. And the answer is that reality, the future of mankind, depends on enough people doing it.
What's the alternative? What's the alternative? You always come to the point where you go, oh, that's the problem. Most people are looking at something and they're looking at it with the relative comforts that exist. But those comforts are being destroyed. They're being taken away, right? So you're on this trajectory where everything that you have is being taken away. And it's far better to take what you have now, the resources that you have now, and take the pain up early rather than waiting to the point where the pain is going to be immeasurably larger. I see this is exactly the same thing as metaphorically think about working out. Okay, so if you don't go to the gym, or if you can't do 20 push-ups, and someone asks you to do 20 push-ups, you're going to go through a whole lot of pain, right? But if you just every day did 5, you could do 20 a day, even if you do 5 and then another 5 and whatever, right? So you do that every day, you'll build up resistance. Your body goes, oh, okay, that's a stress that I have to accommodate. I've got to be able to do that, and off it goes. And then doing 20 push-ups is not a problem, right? So now when you're introduced with a problem, which could be 40 push-ups, you can actually do 40 push-ups. If you regularly do 20 every day, you'll do 40, okay? But if you've never done any, 40 is just, you can't do it. And so we've become so weak, so complacent, so mollycoddled that metaphorically we're the guy that just can't even do 5 push-ups. And that's mentally as well as physically. So and this is true in business and everything, and I look at people who, I was chatting to a gentleman the other day, and he's in his 50s, and he's like, oh, you're so lucky and this and that. I've always wanted to run my own business. And I'm like, no, you don't. I called him out. I said, no, you don't want to run your own business. Yeah, no, I do. I said, if you really wanted it, you'd be doing it. If you really wanted it, you would have done it. But what you took was the easier route. You took a pay packet. You took a CEO salary. You took all of that bullshit because you didn't really want it. You never tested yourself. You never put yourself under that pressure. Well, guess what? We're in the situation now where we're already under a lot of pressure. We're going to be put under immeasurable pressure. And most people are not going to be able to survive it. They're going to cow. They're going to be sheep, and they're going to get slaughtered. The only way forward is to understand that, build resilience, and go out now and take whatever pain you need to take and build what you can. So if you're educating your kids, you've got to go and educate your kids. Yes, you might have to give up some time. You might have to rearrange your schedule. You might be a whole lot of things you've got to do, but that's your option. And it's, I'm just using those as examples, but I think that runs across the gamut of society, because everything that we have subcontracted out to these government entities is going to get taken away. And not only is it, even if it wasn't going to get taken, and when I say taken away, they're going to just whittle it down and turn it into an even more dystopian nightmare. Already the indoctrination camps are ridiculous. They're teaching. I've got another example. I'm getting off track, but a gentleman who's I know down the road, who's at the gym with me. He's a teacher at a local school. Teaches 5-year-olds. He's just giving up his job. Why is he giving up his job? Because the new curriculum in New Zealand has 5-year-olds learning about anal sex, and he's like, I'm not teaching this. I can't teach this to these kids. I'm not doing it. So he's taken that stand, and he's now scrambling around trying to find some other work, and good on him. But you
Isn't that the point? Isn't that the point, Chris? Is that there is always something you can do to make a stand on these values, and with that, you obviously are living your values as a consequence. But more importantly, you just don't know who else you might have inspired just that little bit and given them enough encouragement to go and do exactly the same thing.
Agreed.
Yeah. And I mean, there is always something one can do, to live these values, notwithstanding that we live in a society for whom, at a political level anyway, these values are anathema. There is always still in your own life every day choices you can make that validate and align to these values.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's no easy answers. That's the thing. It's not about convenience or easy. It's about doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Want to remind everyone, if you haven't already, or if you're listening on the replay, hit that like button, the retweet button. We're here live with Chris MacIntosh, talking about the best philosophy known to man, and also a little bit of what it's like living in New Zealand along the way. We've got about 25 minutes remaining here, so if you did have any questions, comments for Dave, for Chris, for myself as we're going through, make sure you tap that button at the bottom of the screen, the request for the microphone. We'll bring you up here. You can ask your question, make your comment, and we'll keep going. So also, Chris's website is in the thread, guys, so if you haven't subscribed to what he's putting out there, newsletter and beyond, it's all right there, capitalistexploits.at. All right.
In a way, I mean, there's never a cloud without a silver lining, as we often reflect on. But, I mean, there is a real positive that came out of all the COVID madness, isn't it? And you did see, we certainly saw in New Zealand, we saw that truckers convoy in Canada was a sensation. We saw several initiatives in the US, and we saw it in New Zealand, didn't we? Where people came out of the woodwork, they hit the streets, they marched. We had the Parliament, the big protest at Parliament, and we had people who were overtly pushing back on this. Now these are people who, if that event hadn't happened, may not have been caused to think about some of these ideas we're talking about, some of these values. But I know people whose lives were changed immeasurably in a positive way as a consequence of experiencing that, the political stupidity and participating in the pushback. So
I'm going through, and I don't know if you saw it, Dave. I'm going through our thread here, and I see Anissa, who's listening. It looks like she might be in New Zealand. She posted some information on the Christchurch false flag and a funny photo there below. So thank you, Anissa, for chiming into the conversation. I'm just now seeing that. But yeah, Chris, did you
Yeah,
go
that's
ahead.
no. I know. Just going to reiterate that point is that the people who did push back. I mean, if one stops and talks to them, they're all decent people who knew something was wrong and who were motivated consequentially to actually do something they had never done in their life before. So that's seriously positive. I mean, in New Zealand, and let's just give this some perspective. New Zealand's got a population of 5 million people. An organisation that was run by three delightful women. I've met two of them who are essentially housewives. They called themselves Voices for Freedom. And I mean, they ended up with 100,000 on their mailing list, 100,000 supporters. This is in a population of 5 million people. This is serious. They got absolutely pilloried by the mainstream media, and they just withstood all of that. And I know what it's like to get attacked by the mainstream media, and it does take a lot of emotional fortitude, and it does take a lot of being able to think these things through rationally and logically to withstand that. These people withstood it magnificently, and to the point that this started over 3 years ago. They now have their own radio station called Reality Check Radio, and they are talking to their audience up and down the country in New Zealand. That is sensational, and none of that would have ever happened if it wasn't for the fact that these outrageous situations arose. So, and I have a personal view, and I'm sure Chris does too. Anytime you see any civil disobedience, people pushing back, particularly when it relates, almost exclusively when it relates to victimless activity, you have to support it and champion it because, that is at the very heart of maintaining or trying to get to a healthy society.
Yeah, I mean, Dave, it's a good point. One of the things that we learned, what a good friend of mine mentioned to me, and I think he was accurate. He said, and this was in 2020, he said, you know what? This has been the best divining rod he's ever had. And it is. There were individuals who you thought were X, and they turned out to be Y, and then those who were Y, and they turned out to be X. Yeah. And it's the old saying, when the chips are down, you find out who's actually got some intestinal fortitude, who's a sheep, who's a wolf.
Yeah. And that's a very good point. That the other side of it is you soon sorted out, who your friends were.
It's true, and I've lost a bunch of friends, just people I can't be asked to talk to, quite frankly, because they're idiots. They've proven themselves to be weak, and I have no interest in being involved with weak people. But then at the same level, I've developed some of the strongest friendships I've ever had in my life out of this.
Right.
And it's so,
and I bet you, Chris, that's a universal theme.
Absolutely. I know it is because we all, we all see it. We all feel it. We talk about it.
It's actually, it's really, it's a great way to continue to look at any future moments that we might face similar to COVID, because there's obviously all the rumblings of like, it's coming back, and it's nice to see the amount of people that are ready to challenge that this time around compared to the first time. So I think, the more there's an attempt to control, it brings the unconquered, right? The uncontrollables together. And so in a way, I guess if we have to face anything like this moving forward, it is pretty, there is 100% an optimistic side to it.
Yeah. Well, people love agreement, and agreement is a powerful force. We see it being used negatively because there was a lot of agreement, for wearing fucking masks or any of the other madness. But it also works, the other way is that you'd be walking along the street without a mask on, and someone else without a mask on would be giving you a thumbs up or wanting to talk to you or whatever, because they'd immediately recognise you as a fellow traveller. Which is delightful. But
It's that divining rod, yeah.
Yeah, as you said, exactly.
But you made a point there, Dave, which I think we'd like to pinpoint, and you said that people like agreement. That's true, but of the sexes, women are far more agreeable than men, always, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And that's why they're trying to feminize society. So, this they're utilizing that femininity to trying to install it in people. And so part of this is men need to stand up and be men. And the fact is, the woman will look up to that. They'll be like, "Wow, there's an actual man. Right? He's prepared to stand up and tell you to fuck off." Despite the repercussions. I've been kicked off of flights. I've had all sorts of thrown out of shops. You know, but I won't bend.
Me too.
And it's that ability or that willingness, not that I'm eager for it a lot, but that willingness to take on conflict. It's not typically a female trait. And what's interesting when you talk about the Voices for Freedom, that was a woman. And I remember back in 2020, I remember sitting there thinking, God, where are the men? Why is it that there's all these women pushing this? Where the fuck are the men? Like, where are they? What are they doing?
No, they were driving to work in a car on their own with their mask on.
Double mask, just to be sure.
Oh yeah, no, that's right.
It does create moments where you can just chuckle about it too. Like, as an example, there's a conference that I'm attending soon where, and I couldn't believe this really for a real estate conference as far as the demographics of who's attending, but they made it mandatory on the name tags to put he, him, she, her, they, them.
I wouldn't go. I wouldn't.
And so, well, hopefully you'll like this, Chris. I emailed them and I said, can you please remove this from my name tag? And they emailed me back today and they said your request has been processed. So I'm sure once I'm there, it'll stand out, and then you'll attract who you want to do business with.
Yeah. Christ.
No. Well, I put my pronouns as fuck and off. That's just incredible. Well, that's a classic sheep response, isn't it? Is that everyone just all of a sudden takes it on as a badge of honor to be putting your pronouns down. Good job.
But
anyway,
look, part of this is also, look, I'm an asset manager, so there's convexity in this. There's asymmetry because I'm seeing it in the fossil fuel space. While we have Wall Street banks who are all fighting over the fanciest new pronouns they can come up with and being unwilling to finance the devil incarnate.
Oh, it looks like you cut out there, Chris. Or is that just
You said devil incarnate, then we lost you.
Oh.
All right, you're back now.
Yeah, it was someone trying to ring me.
We got you.
There
you go.
Yeah, look, it opens up opportunities for others to take advantage. So it's not all bad.
Yeah. It wasn't a government agency, you think, ringing you?
No, I know who it is.
Someone may have reported you, that's all.
Yeah, I'll get reported a lot, I guess.
Well, so to wind this one down, Dave,
You'll pay my bail, won't you, Dave?
Oh yeah, no. Don't you worry, Chris. I'll be right there.
I understand, Dave. The North Island's weather is a bit better than where you're at. What would be your thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah, actually, just talking about weather, I read a great story yesterday talking about climate change, of course, because everyone's going nuts how hot it is. And in New Zealand, it has up and down the country been a mild winter and obviously extreme heats in the Northern Hemisphere. But I read a great story yesterday about the Tongan volcano. I don't know whether everyone has studied that. We had last year that volcano in Tonga, just off the coast of Tonga, I should say, erupted, which was one of the most powerful eruptions for a long, long time. I don't know how many thousand years. And it was easy to dismiss because it's sort of a reasonably remote place at the bottom of the world. But it dumped so much water vapor into the atmosphere. It increased the water vapor content in the atmosphere by over 20%. And of course, water vapor is one of the most potent greenhouse gases, and the end consequence of that is that we have experienced an increase in heat. And I mean, this is the bizarre thing about climate change. We're having a rain event in the town that I'm at in the South Island of New Zealand at the moment. Civil emergency's been declared. It's a big problem. And look, I can tell you as a property developer, when you are developing a property, one of the things that you have to do to appease the local authority, the local council that you're working with, is how are you handling stormwater, and you have to design a stormwater system that will handle a 1 in 100-year event. Now, the event we're having today is not 1 in 100 years. It might be 1 in a 10 or 20-year event that we're having at the moment. But, I mean, you have 1 in 100-year events and you prepare for them because there are major events of all sorts of nature in the course of 100 years, 1,000 years, 100,000 years. And just this notion that all of a sudden we have some quirk in our weather or some incident or event in our weather, we're all immediately assigning it to this ill-described or ill-defined notion of climate change, and then we're assigning it to the fact that when I go out today, I'll be driving a diesel V8.
Right,
which
right.
is
Well, and
yeah.
we spoke about it recently here too, and I can't remember which show it was, but the wildfires in Canada that are taking place and all
Yeah,
over North
there you
America.
go.
I mean, growing up, I don't, and maybe I just missed it. Maybe I wasn't paying attention. I mean, I try not, like Chris said, I try not to pay that much attention to the news in general. But it seems
Yeah.
like it's been ramped up and it's been relatively, or maybe even obviously intentional by whoever's starting up these fires and these events like this. And Jeff Berwick, now I think about it too, he showed a weather map of Canada and I think it was the United Kingdom from 20 years ago with the exact same temperatures as what we're seeing now. But on the weather maps now, they're changing the topography where it's like it's red and it's yellow and orange, so that way it looks like it's
Yeah.
on fire when 20 years ago
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was green. So it's
Yeah,
you
yeah.
make a good
No,
point
no.
there, Dave.
Yeah, no. It's all appalling behaviour, isn't it? And of course, the fires are generally speaking, or more often than not, in state-owned, government-owned land. Which the state in every jurisdiction around the planet owns or controls these huge swathes of land. And then, of course, because of all the green initiatives, those forests or dense areas have not been looked after as they should be, and with that, they just become fire traps.
Well, we're coming to the end here to this week's episode, and I say this week's episode. We are planning for 2024. So if you have any thoughts or recommendations on what you do, like or want to see more of with ANCAP Radio, again, make sure you get on the email list there. You can shoot us a message, shoot us a DM, comment in the thread. We're getting ready for 2024, which will have more shows on the platform. But Dave and then Chris, thank you for investing your time here. In that order, what would you say were some of your biggest takeaways from today's conversation?
Well, of course, it's the old story, isn't it? Is that the most critical thing here is living this philosophy, understanding this philosophy, understanding its moral foundations, and living it is critical. I just want to pick up on those other shows we're talking about, Adam, that we've been discussing. I mean, one of the shows we're talking about doing is a regular show each week where people can come on, no matter who they are and where they live, to tell their story of how they live the ANCAP philosophy and how they've dealt with state aggression in any particular area. In fact, we were looking at and we're looking at putting up a prize, a monthly prize to the person who has most successfully resisted the state's madness, the state's aggression. So it'd be great to get some feedback from people on that.
Are we able to tease out the size of that monthly prize?
Well, I don't know. How much was I having to put up to bail, Chris? Do you remember?
I think that was 100,000.
You can leave me to rot. Give it to someone else. It's all right.
Okay.
I'll sell one of the kids.
There you go. And I'm sure there's a ready market for them, Chris. I don't know. Let's think of a decent prize. Maybe we can get a sponsor who will come in on the prize, but otherwise we'll put it up ourselves. But I mean, those are the people I so love. These people who are just living their lives. They get smacked up by the state, and they absolutely have the balls to go the distance and give the state a run for their money, and then triumph. Those people need all the support and all the acknowledgement and validation that we certainly can give. Anyway, we'll think about the prize, Adam.
Sounds good. And Chris, key takeaways from today's time together.
Yeah, I liked what Dave mentioned at the start, which was about personal responsibility. I think all of this comes back to that. If people begin to take personal responsibility, you can't take that challenge on without thinking. Because the biggest problem that we've got, I think one of the biggest problems that we have certainly is the inability to think critically. Certainly the chaos of the last 3.5 years is evidence of that. And so if you take it's like the idea that you can't herd cats, right? Why? Because cats cannot think for themselves. You can take a whole lot of people to actually think. That's so personal responsibility. If everybody takes more personal responsibility, it's impossible not to think, and that starts leading us out of this dystopian nightmare in a more rapid fashion than anything else I can think of.
And exactly.
And that's what we call a mic drop here on ANCAP Radio, ladies and gentlemen. So again, thank you for tuning in. If you haven't checked out any of the links in the thread, again, reminder, highly, highly recommend to check those out. We found the interview in there, by the way, that Chris did on homeschooling, recent podcast. So Chris, I know I'm going to be checking that one out here soon as I got my second on the way, and something I've thought very hard about. So thank you, Jaffer, for bringing up that topic. But again, everyone, give us a like, give us a retweet here on the space. If you don't follow Chris or ANCAP Radio, Dave, myself, give us all a follow. And we'll see you here next week at 3 o'clock. And we'll go ahead and tease this one out. It's going to be about the truth about 9/11. So I know that's a compelling topic. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm sure Dave is too. So guys, make sure we'll see you next week, 3 o'clock on Thursday. That's Eastern time. We'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Chris. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks, folks. All the best.